people, or you can put your computer with HDMI.
Okay, you can load
like
it here.
you want.
It's the circle USB.
Of Aragon 1 right now. First of all, sorry I couldn't be in Paris with all of you, which I would have really liked, but decided to take some extra precautions with the current virus outbreak. And today, the topic that I wanted to talk about is one of the things that we've been spending most of our time at Aragon lately, which are how can we get subjective agreements into decentralized organizations. So at Aragon, we've been working on DAOs since late 2016, and we've been seeing a lot of patterns in terms of the operations of these organizations, and this is something that we've been spending a lot of time on, and that can dramatically improve the way that we interact with DAOs. So in terms of the current outlook with DAOs, how is it to operate DAOs in 2020 right now? The thing that it's kind of replicated in every organization right now is that there's a small fraction of highly motivated members. Sometimes it's even just one of them that really cares for the organization, has a vision for it, and kind of is convincing others to join in crafting some of or most of the proposals, and then whipping votes, right? There's this process of knowing what the organization was doing, but then there's someone that actually takes on the work of making that happen in the organization. And this is not necessarily bad. It's kind of the pattern that we're seeing with the current state of the technology. And another thing that is kind of very apparent is that the proposals that do pass in organizations usually have very low voter turnout. And this again is not something that is not necessarily bad, but it's kind of a sign that the governance and like the decision making of the organization was already happening somewhere else, and then the moment that people interact with the DAO is kind of telling the machine what it needs to do, and there's a lot of these operations. So people are not checking proposals every moment because they're mainly small type proposals that they already gather consensus on. But on the other side of this is that this voter apathy can lead to legitimate proposals being unnoticed, given that every single thing needs to be voted on by all the members of by some of the members of the organization. If there's a high volume of proposals, something that is actually very important that can set the course for how the organization operates, that can be unnoticed, and these are the proposals that actually deserve the attention of the entire organization. On the other side, we have traditional entities with legal entities that right now are managed way more optimistically. And by optimistically, I mean that not every operation in a traditional legal entity needs to be approved by all the shareholders of this organization, or they don't even get a say on this. And this can be done because there are like two main things that are present here. First of all, is that there's social capital at stake. doing something malicious can be a very bad hit for the reputation of someone that is a manager for the organization. So that kind of prevents people from doing so. Like, you wouldn't do the likelihood of you doing something very malicious if you're seeing these people, or that you know them and have a relationship. It's less likely. And there's also trusting the institutions that can offer recourse in case that something actually goes bad. If you do something malicious as an executive or as a manager of an organization, you know that there can be repercussions even if you can do that. But on the other hand, by the characteristics of DAOs, and when I'm talking about DAOs, I'm talking about like completely sovereign DAOs that do not have any sort of legal wrapping or KYC. They're managed very, very pessimistically today. This is due to kind of some of the nice properties that DAOs have, such as being permissionless and pseudonymity friendly, right? The members of an organization, you couldn't know if they're like a person or a refrigerator. For all you know, they're just addresses and that do things with the organization. And this kind of has the consequence that there's really there's not necessarily any social capital at stake if they're like completely permissionless and pseudonymous. And actually, because of this, there's also little to no legal recourse or recourse of any sense in case that a malicious action happens in the organization. Once an action happens, there's usually no way to get that reverted. So that being able to not being able to have these properties makes DAOs like very inefficient to run, because every single thing that the organization needs to do requires the explicit approval and the pessimistic approval by members of the organization. Just a simple example on this, in a traditional entity, we have Bob, who is like a person in this company that has access to perform transactions and from the company's bank account. If every time that Bob imagine that he's the head of HR and runs payroll, he had to ask for permission, it would be very, very inefficient. But even if he has permission to like potentially move like a huge sum of money to his own bank account, he knows that the legal and social consequences of that are very bad, and there's also the chance that someone will see that malicious transfer, will ask around, and there's even possibility that the transfer will be able to be reverted even before that happens. So these are some of the deterrents that prevent bad behavior, even though there's the authorization, technically the authorization to perform anything in the like out of the company bank account. And this comes with massive efficiency, in which like there's no need for every member, every shareholder, or even like have very strict authorization processes, because someone we know that there's recourse for that. And this is something that we really cannot do with DAOs, because for a DAO, for an organization that just lives in a smart contract that is like a computer program after all, it cannot sense the difference in like the type of transactions. A transfer for a performance bonus can be also theft of someone that they just want to get a bonus that was totally not approved, or something very specific with DAOs, that a transfer to move the entire treasury of the organization to some other address. It can be because of a migration to an improved, better version of the software that doesn't have a bug, or it can be a 51% attack. For all we know, these are things that have a subjective, like some subjectivity that is either really hard to encode into a computer program, let alone do it without bugs or ways to exploit it, or just impossible because it's impossible to encode these rules. And these are for more specific, like clear cases of even theft. But there's also aspects of that's the thing that we're doing, even aligned with our values or the mission or the organization, and also making sure that we can encode protections for minority stakeholders, which is something that a computer program cannot understand either. So with agreements, what we wanted to do is encoding rules in DAOs that they're not objective. They're not something that you can put into a computer program, but at the same time, we can do something to protect minorities stakeholders in a DAO from a tyranny of the majority that could steal all the assets, and also that can allow this more optimistic management style of the organization akin to traditional entities, but also keeping most of the advantages, if not all of the advantages, of sovereign digital organizations that are not controlled by or cannot be interfered with by a government or any third parties. So this is something that we wrote about with the original Aragon Network white paper, and that we've been polishing. But the something that became very apparent very fast is that for DAOs and digital organizations to become widely used and very useful, there's some services that the state provides that we kind of need to replicate, because these completely sovereign entities that don't have any legal entity counterparty, they just cannot use because they're not recognized by the system. So this is why we started working on our Aragon network, which we say it is a digital jurisdiction for digital organizations, trying to bridge the gap with some of these services. At the end, very simply, it's a DAO and a family of protocols that create a parallel system of law that DAOs can opt into. This is very important. This is not something that it's going to be imposed to any DAO. This is a completely opt-in jurisdiction that the DAOs can opt into in order to get some of these advantages. And also, it's jurisdiction that is a completely true limited liability. This is also because of the properties of the system. A blockchain cannot, or a computer program cannot put you in jail by itself. So everything that we do must be with clear collateralized actions that are put beforehand, and that is, everyone knows that is the maximum amount of liability that they can have when performing actions. And the biggest thing is enabling trustful interactions between individuals and organizations, and also between interactions from organization to organization, being able to tap into this subjective aspects that happen every day while running an organization or doing business is very, very important for the efficient running of these organizations. And these are services infrastructure and services that are provided to all the users of Aragon. One of the keystones of this of the Aragon network, and it's Aragon Court. So Aragon Court is a dispute resolution protocol that it was built to be able to solve subjective disputes in an organization, either between the members, especially between the members of the organization and the relationship with each other and the organization itself. It can be used by any Ethereum account or DAO, including the Aragon network itself, which is by itself a DAO, which is very different from the legal system. This is a jurisdiction, a protocol that just doesn't understand legal personality other than what it's explicitly said in the agreement. So anyone can use it and be able to solve subjective disputes. And most importantly, it's also governed by ANT holders that get to parameterize the protocol to make sure it can operate correctly. So these are some screenshots from the Aragon Court dashboard, which was launched on February 10th, and it's been running for over a month now. The way that the protocol works is very simple, really. So whenever someone creates a dispute, there's a period for anyone to provide evidence and kind of their arguments for why the dispute should be resolved one way or another. And then there's we draft jurors are drafted randomly, proportionally to their stake. And they get, whenever they get drafted, they're required to review the case, commit and reveal their vote. And at that point, there's a tally of all the votes that the jurors submitted. There's a provisional ruling that can be appealed if someone doesn't feel like that was a fair outcome. In order to appeal the appeal to move forward, there needs to be someone that supports another side. If there's no one that wants to confirm the appeal and support the previous decision, we go to a final ruling, and this can be appealed a small number of times until there's a final round in which all the jurors are invited to vote, and a final outcome is decided upon. For jurors, the jurors have been already staking into Aragon Court by converting ANT into ANJ. ANJ is the native staking token of the court, and it gives jurors like a proportional chance to be drafted for disputes, and also a proportional pro rata share of the subscription fees that are collected by the court, by the organizations that rely on it. So far, we were very happy and very surprised that over 250 jurors joined at launch, and after launch, there's been some more activations and deactivations, but the total number of jurors in the Aragon network has been around 250, with over 1 million ANT staked. So with this infrastructure, Aragon agreements, they're a set of non-computable rules that an organization sets to define whether an organization interaction is licit or illicit. And the core idea that we want to get with this is turning crypto-native organizations, or DAOs, from very pessimistic organizations into optimistic ones. The way that it works is that certain actions in the DAO, even like transferring assets directly, can be limited more than just do it by a vote, but be able to do it by agreement signers directly, as we'll see in some examples later. Signing an agreement requires locking some certain amount of collateral that the agreement defines, and then if the signer misbehaves by submitting a malicious action, their collateral can be slashed. And the way that we decide if the action that they're performing goes with the agreement is decided by Aragon Court by creating a dispute. The parameters that an agreement has, and I won't go too much into details. There's the agreement text. So agreements, even though there's a smart contract component that manages them, they're actually a human readable explanation of how it works, which allows to encode a lot of subtlety and processes that would be very, very difficult to encode into a smart contract. Then there's some parameters with regards to what are the collateral requirements, what is the delay, because all the actions need to be delayed in order for them to be stopped in time, and then kind of the statute of limitations for after how much time after you just perform that action can you be slashed for it. This is a simple example of an agreement that we made for a particular use case, which I won't get into right now. But kind of the flow for signing an agreement, once the organization sets the agreement and invites certain parties, is they will review the agreement and see what rights they will get by virtue of signing the agreement. And if they agree with that and they want to get that power and use the organization in that way, they will lock the collateral, which will enable them to perform actions with a certain delay. this is an example of a UI mock that we have for that we're working with for agreements, but this is still an early prototype. And in terms of the action, whenever there's an action submitted, and signer of the agreement performs the action, and rather than executing the action directly, the action gets queued and it's put in a delayed queue for execution that anyone can see and decide whether they think that the action goes accordingly with the agreement that they signed. And if they don't think that's the case, they can create a challenge for the action that comes with a settlement offer, in which someone can say, okay, if you decide to not perform this action, you can get this part of your collateral or not get slashed at all. If there's no settlement, then the action will be taken to Aragon Court, and the execution will be decided upon. It's another mockup. In kind of very, very briefly going into some of the use cases that we think are very, very interesting for agreements. The first one is proposal agreements, and this is our solution for 51% attacks. So even an organization can set what the rules for making proposals, what things can even be voted on, and this can be a way to prevent the tyranny of the majority, because some types of proposals, one in which a minority is clearly clearly removed from their rights in the agreement, that can be stopped and not even voted on by the organization, so that minorities can be sure that even if a majority vote could screw them and take over their rights, they know that there's a recourse for proposals not to be even voted on if they're not according to how the organization operates. In terms of efficiency, there's also this thing that we call executive agreements, that for some recurring task in the organization or very low stakes actions, an organization can set executive type agreements that allow certain members in the organization to directly execute actions in the organization without having to go through a vote. If they go over the line and they perform something that they weren't allowed to perform, their action can be challenged before it even gets executed. But for the very long tail of operations in a DAO that might be recurring, this can be performed without even getting to a vote. And to end, and something that we're actively looking on right now, and that I think it's very interesting, is what we call governance agreements. Right now, managing DAOs, it's already happening off-chain, and the governance process is happening off-chain for the most part, and kind of the actual voting in the DAO is kind of like pressing buttons in the machine after the decision was already made in some instances. So what a governance agreement could allow is say, okay, we're deferring some of these decision-making processes directly to an off-chain mechanism, be that a poll or whatever mechanism that might be. And then an observer or a member of the organization can directly execute the action in the organization based on the fact that there was already consensus off-chain for that. And if that wasn't the case, then it can be challenged and evidence can be provided for whether there was consensus or not for the action. So these are some of the examples and use cases that we're seeing with agreements, but we're super excited to see what people build with them, and actually how we can take DAOs from these very pessimistic, slow, inefficient machines into getting some of the nice properties that traditional organizations have without losing all the nice properties that DAOs have. Thank you.